Hello everyone, and welcome to episode showcase on Dark Souls Remaster. Now moving on with the other weapons in the very beginning of the game, you'll find one called the Mail Breaker. Now you may remember this from Dark Souls 3, but one giant defining difference is in Dark Souls 3 it was classified as a dagger. In Dark Souls 1, it's a thrusting sword. Yeah, whatever. A standard small thrusting sword. Unsharpened to a point but solid shaft that pierces tough armor. Can be thrust using the weight of one's body and is very effective for critical attacks, implying for parrying and backstabbing, but mostly parrying. Why though? Well, in actual history, there's no one defining blade called the Mail Breaker. Such honor is probably given to the Durandal dagger, though they look nothing alike. But the parrying bolt, the Mail Breaker, is probably a more classification of a parry dagger, which is often used in your offhand along with your rapier on your right, or your standing arming sword, to deflect your opponent's blade and to thrust with either the dagger or your sword depending on your preference. So, as much as say it's sharpened to a point, trying to force this thing through solid armor would still be a great challenge. It would probably do far better at striking these small holes and gaps, hence probably why it's classified as a thrusting sword, because that's what they were designed to do, so it go between the gaps of the armor. Although if it was fighting against chainmail or a mail, it would be more than sufficient, because it would probably pierce it pretty easily, given enough force, or not that much force at all for that matter. Now for the animations for the Mail Breaker, you got the standard rapier set. As you can see, the standard move is just rapid thrusts. The power move is a heavy thrust, using a lot of your body's weight. The light step back attack, it's a bit of a hop and a stab, if you will. A little silly looking, but hey, it would be painful if you got that to the face. The light rolling attack is a rapid stab, although twisting your wrist while doing so. Now you go two-handed wise, the animation remains pretty much almost entirely the same. It just may be more exaggerated in some animations. As you've seen, the normal attack and power attack almost identical. Now with light step attack again, almost identical, just using two hands with it all. Pretty much everything is two-handed. So yeah. Then you got the plunge attacks, which is just a rapid thrust forward. One-handed or two-handed, identical. So yeah. Although, it is a bit short for a thrusting weapon, isn't it? So yeah, it makes more sense as a dagger in Dark Souls 3 than it does for a thrusting sword, but whatever. Now, going on to stats for the Mail Breaker. Physically, it has the damage of a dagger, clearly. Only 57 ball physical damage, and only 45 with my bonus stats. So yeah. However, as I mentioned, the critical is 120. Now, this isn't the greatest critical in the game. There's other weapons that do better, some significantly better. But 20 critical is significant. It will do plenty of damage, as I'll show later on. As some people like to write off this weapon as complete garbage, it is not. I'll prove it in this video here. Now, moving on to parameter bonus, you got a D for strength and a C for dexterity. So more than enough to get some scaling on this, though scaling is the back seat for this weapon. Moving on from that, you got the parameter bonus, which you need 5 strength, 12 dexterity, and not much. So you'll get this early on the game. Essentially, it's going to be your very first thrusting sword, although a very lackluster one at that, due to its length. So durability is 200 points, which is plenty, and the weight is the lightest of all thrusting swords and most other weapons at 0.5. So it's very light at that. So yes. So yeah, we'll go over a couple interesting things in performance regarding the critical, but in more or less we'll go on to the upgrade section. Now, the first upgrade we got, well, level 15, which is alright, but not that great. Then I went to lightning, because I had to juggle some things around, so not that great either. And we got magic, and I didn't use magic, but yet again, enchantment. The enchanted version wins out in terms of total damage. So I'll be using that version for the performance. We got divine, which is fairly comparable, decent. An occult, which almost wins out at second place. It's third actually compared to magic. We got fire, which always seems to be terrible of a choice. And chaos, which never scales that great. I only put 35 humanity because any more is a little excessive. And you got crystal, which is not barely any more powerful than enchanted. Now, before we get started, here's something interesting. When I was going around, this guy bugged me, and I did a little parry on him. Plenty of damage right there. 846. If you didn't quite catch it, here it is again. This is level 15, not enchanted. So yes, 846. Here it is with enchantment. Now I want to compare it side by side. So 846 was level 15. Now the AR damage for enchantment between level 15 is significant, but however, a critical attack isn't that much different, at least on these guys. But still, it's a small difference. Okay, now for the actual performance properly. Now, aside from parallel parrying and critical attacks, stabbing weapon, this weapon's kind of shit. It's kind of terrible. It makes for an excellent, oh surprise, you're dead move. Yeah, clearly. But everything else, it kind of fucking blows. So no doubt this is the part where people just writes off this weapon, like, it's not that great, could do better. So yeah. So now here comparison to Dark Souls 3, if you saw that video back then, when I first started this whole weapon showcase thing back then, the special move for the parry dagger, or the parrying mail breaker, was the piercing shields. Now I wanted to actually test that here, and single-handed wise, it doesn't quite do it, but actually two-handed, it can get through a shield. And quite effectively too. You just keep stabbing and you can go through that shield very quickly. Now that was a bit of a messy version of that, but let's try it again a bit more cleanly, a bit more quickly. So you see here, just keep stabbing and you go right through that shield. It's a bad idea trying to guard against it. But now, against an opponent that you can't parry, like the Capra Demon, choose a different weapon. Trust me. It's just, as I've tried twice, and I successfully parried the move, but he does not have any parry animation. He cannot be parried. So this is where this weapon is complete shit. It's like anything that cannot be parried should be just use a different weapon entirely. So yeah, but enemies that can be, such as any humanoid character, it's easy. Like, dirt easy. Well, once you get good at parrying, that is. I'm not the best at parrying, but come on, look at it, I can spam this. I can just spam this, and he just walks right into it. Dark Souls 1, I missed you. Okay, moving on to the pros and cons of the Mailbreaker. On the pros, it's your first thrusting weapon, and possibly your first critical weapon, depending on what character you started with. That's being said, it is also an incredibly powerful critical weapon if you know how to parry, but that's the problem in the beginning of the game. If you're green, you don't know how to parry so well. Alright, and that's kind of it for the pros of this weapon. I guess it's also light, but moving on. On the cons, it is too short for a thrusting weapon. It is the shortest thrusting weapon, and it's half the length of most others, almost half the length. So that's pretty darn short. It's useless against any enemy you cannot parry, like entirely useless. Like you can take the rapier and all the other thrusting swords and still do modern even without having to rely on critical hits. So yeah. So that being said, moving on to the score. Damage, I'm going to be a B+. This kind of goes for all critical weapons, well, usually in that category. Because if you do 1,000 to 800 damage in one hit, that's plenty. But that only works on certain opponents, that's why it's not higher. Reach, a D-. The reach is pretty shit for a thrusting sword. Not the worst, but it's not exactly good. Animation, a D- as well. Mainly because you give something that's almost the size of a dagger with the animations of a sword, and yeah, it just doesn't fit very well. It's too darn short. Scaling, I'm going to give a C-. Scaling isn't that great. That's not the forefront of this weapon, unfortunately. Miscellaneous, though, I'm going to give it a C+. It is possibly your first critical weapon and your first thrusting sword, and it doesn't require very high requirements to use. So in total, I believe the Mailbreaker falls into a total of a C+ category. So it's not total garbage, but it's an adequate weapon that you find early in the game, which is fitting. So yes, the weapon's not perfect, it's not awesome, but it is a weapon regardless, and you can get through the game with it. It's just, you go to the wiki page, at least on a date of me making this, and there's some pretty biased opinions on that. But no matter, that's been Showcase for today. Thank you all for watching, and hope to see you guys next time. Take care out there.